Welcome, welcome. And again, given the fact that we are in the midst of a terrible situation in Israel and Gaza, and I'd like to dedicate this lesson in the hopes of God, whatever we can do, our own little part in terms of bringing a divine resolution to what has been going on for such a long time, and which is bringing so much pain to so many people, and I think unnecessary pain, if I may say that. So without that further ado, as they say, we will get into our text. And here we are. So we are actually, we're studying in this parsha Torah Temimah, because we merited to finish the Rashis on Parshat Sheet, and we will go back to Rashi, I'm sure, for Parshat Noach, because I think we're still finishing that off. However, we're here, and this is the section here where he tells from Megillah Tet, page 9 of Tractate Megillah in the Babylonian Talmud, on the first side of the page, Maaseh b'Talmai HaMelech, a story told about Ptolemy, the king, who brought together 72 Shivim V'Shnayim Zakenim, elders, V'Hichnisan B'Shivim V'Shnayim Batim, and he placed each one of them into a house. So there were 72 houses. And he said to each one, Kitvuli Torat Moshe Rabchem, write for me essentially a translation of the Torah of Moses, your teacher. And God basically gave a advice in the hearts of each and every one of them. I'm, of course, trying to translate literally. In other words, that they were divinely inspired. And they all came up with the same translation, essentially. They all had the same idea, and they wrote in this particular passage, they translated, this is the Septuagint that we're talking about, Elohim bara bereshit, God created in the beginning.
Did we say the bracha?
That's where I was going.
Okay.
I don't think so, because I usually mute right after that.
Then let me do it. I may have been distracted by my concerns about what's going on in the Middle East. Baruch
I always blame this.
Well,
recently.
I still have to take responsibility.
Yeah.
I have to say, an explanation is not an excuse. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
And as the Beatles say, I get by with a little help from my friends. So we actually did quite a bit of this in the previous lesson. And so I'm going to pick this up. Essentially, he's explaining why Ptolemy did this, that he actually was trying to show that you really couldn't translate the Torah well. And so, in other words, that the Torah was not that big a help. And in some senses, trying to find a level of imperfection and falsity in the Torah. And of course, this is saying it didn't happen, right? He's going to explain. And the idea that he took, why dafka 72 elders? Pashuthu shigiven lemispar hasanhedrin. It's clear that Ptolemy was intending to use the same number as the Great Sanhedrin in Jerusalem, and that was, of course, the highest court of the land. Vayitachen, and it would appear, shekiven bazeh liot batuach be'emunat ha'ataka, that in this sense, the reason he did this was he wanted to be certain. In other words, he wanted to prove that the translation ha'ataka, that the translation was either legit or not legit. That if they all disagreed, then obviously it would run it in. But on the other hand, of course, if it was consistent, then that would give a great deal of credence to the translation. So there may have been a sincere element here. For af al pi, so but there's a problem here, and he's going to go into it. For af al pi de stam Sanhedrin hem b'mismar ayin aleph. He says, well, wait a second. He says, even though when we talk about the Sanhedrin, we're talking about 71 ish, 71 men. K'mevu'ar b'mishnah Reish Sanhedrin Bet Aleph, as is clarified at the very beginning of Tractate Sanhedrin, page 2, side 1. Ach ze niva'er im yirtzeh Hashem b'makom acher. But God willing, we will explain this in another place. De levat ha'ayin aleph ish, that apart from the 71 men, haya od echad al gabehem, there was in fact one more man who was sort of like the chair. He was over them. Vaya nikra mufla shiba Sanhedrin, and he was known as the distinguished mufla, or as Jastrow says, the instructing judge regarding the Sanhedrin. So there was a chairman, right? And that chair would have made the 72nd member of the Sachakol. So in total, Hayu Ayin Bet Ish. So in total, there were in fact 72 men. And he says, Iyen lefanenu b'parshat Pa'alotcha, and see before us, in other words, later on in Parshat Pa'alotcha, that's Numbers, the book of Numbers, a Parshat Numbers, Yud Aleph Tet Zayin. So we're looking at chapter 11, verse 16. V'heinei gam mima'aseh zeh tetalmeh, and also from this incident of Ptolemy, Shekines Ayin Bet Zakenim Ra'aya Lazeh. We could actually say that there's some supporting evidence from the very fact that Ptolemy gathered together 72 elders. V'chama mekomot or Chaim Meforash, and this, it's the abbreviation, right? And so it's explicitly stated, the Mishnah Zvachim, in a Mishnah called Zvachim, Yud Aleph Bet, 11b, Mikublani mipnei shnayim v'shivim zaken. So it says, somebody says there, this person is being quoted, and it says, I received from the mouth of 72 elders. In other words, this person is quoting a law or a tradition, and he says, this I received from 72 elders. The ein kan hamakom la'arich bazeh. He says, but in this case here, right now, there's no need to go even further into the subject. We will leave it at that for now. The tam hashinui kan. So, and the reason why, because we're still trying to deal relatively rigorously with the points that are underlying this comment. He says, why did they make the change, right? Shekatvu lo Elohim bara Bereshit. Why? What was the reason that they made the change, that they wrote God created in the beginning? Right? Piresh Rashi explains, Shelo Yomar Bereshit Shemhu, so that no one would say that the word Bereshit is a name of someone. Ushte Rishuyotem, and that so there's Bereshit and then there's Elohim. They're two different, and they're two powers, right? Verishon bara et hasheni, and that the first power created the second power. Ad kan leshono. This is basically, he's quoting from Rashi, and he says, end of quote. V'hatosafot hikshu, and of course Rashi's grandson, and this is classic, right? That the Tosafot, his grandsons, disagree with their grandpa, and this is of course on the page of the Gemara. Hikshu, they raised an objection. Sha'arei Bereshit eino shem klal. He says, they say, there's no way you could really think of the word Bereshit as being a name, as somebody's name. Ela bi'uro batchila. You know, the way you explain it is that it means in the beginning, right? At the start. That's what Bereshit means. There's no place where you find the word Bereshit as a name. Ve'od halo katvu lo b'lishon Yavanit batchila. And they say not only that, Not only that, but they were writing in Greek, and they wrote in the Greek the word in Greek for in the beginning. And he says, check out that Tosafot, Masha Katvu Bazeh, what they wrote regarding this. In other words, check out that Tosafot for that in the Gemara reference that I think he's talking about in Masechet Megillah. I'm going to guess that's where this is coming from, right? Let's keep going. Yes. Rashi and it makes sense. It says it's appropriate to explain the words of Rashi in his manner. Okay, I think giving him letting him explain it in the way that he meant it. De hakavana he kamosha katvu lamala. That his Rashi's point that he was making is that it's what was written above. In other words, that the point that Baruch haLevi is making, right? That he wrote, de kavodhu, that it's an issue of honor and respect. Lahatchil haTorah b'shem Hashem, to begin the Torah with God's name. That putting God's name at the very first word of the Torah is a way of showing honor to God. Umidelo utchala kain, but because the Torah itself doesn't start that way, yesh lachush shelo yomar to Hashem Elohim hu mi hanivraim, that there's a possibility that one might suspect or one might argue that the name Elohim is actually min hanivraim, was also something of the creatures, something also created, kamoshamayim haaretz, just like the heaven and the earth. V'yehiyeh shiur hakatuv bereshit bara, and I believe this is what it means, that the definite meaning of Scripture when it says Bereshit bara, the words Bereshit bara, Hasiba Harishona, that and I think that the first cause, or the first, right, et Elohim ve'et Hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In other words, what you might think, what you might explain in this word Bereshit is that not that God was there prior to everything, but that the creation of the world came into existence with the existence of God and the existence of heaven and earth all simultaneously. I think that is what he is saying. This shiur hakatuv, I think, means in this context a way to explain Scripture, right? That the first cause was God and the heavens and the earth, that they were all created simultaneously, and that's the point that Rashi is trying to make. And if you have some questions or a need for clarification, please raise your hand and I will try.
No, I love it. It's great.
Okay. Yeah, I thank you, Golda.
It's great. I mean, it just, that makes so much more sense.
Yeah.
Than God just hanging out and just,
right,
forever and ever. And
so,
I like that.
But we don't mean that, right? I mean, we don't want him to mean that, right?
Right.
Yeah. We want to say that God is in fact transcendent. Right. Okay. Let's go to the next one. Let's find out where it is. Let's see. Okay, so where are we now? Okay. We're here, right? Bereshit bara Elohim, right? In the beginning of God's creation, right? Sha'alu hamini. So the sectarians asked at Rabbi Simlai. They asked Rabbi Simlai. So sectarians, I think we are talking about people who may have been Jewish, right? If we can use that term, I think we can, right? But who in a sense changed the essential beliefs and did not want to follow traditional understanding of the Torah. And that's what they mean by minim, right? Kama Elohut baru et haolam. How many gods created the world? So this would have been one of the elements of their sectarianism, is that they questioned whether or not there was one ultimate, sole, unique deity, right? So they asked Rabbi Simlai, how many gods created the world? And there's a little footnote here, and we'll take a look at it. Ba'u lekantro b'mikraot. Okay, these sectarians came to chide him by bringing up scriptural verses, shebahem niskar shem hashon b'lashon rabim, verses where God is referenced in the plural. So he gives you some examples. Na'aseh adam b'tzalmenu. Let us make man in our image, right? Us. Hava nerda. Let us go down. V'nivle sham etzvatam, and confuse their languages. Tower of Babel story. Another example. Kisham niglu elav. Plural, right? For there revealed to him, right? Was revealed to him. Find the place, Elohim. And of course, the word Elohim itself, we know, is a plural form. And that's Parshat Vayishlach. That's in Parshat Vayishlach later on in Genesis, Va'od Kahena, and similar kinds of verses. V'ratzu lekantro more, and they wanted to chide him, saying, Ki shtei rishu yodhem, to say that is an indication that there really are two gods. Yes, Judith. Judith, are you able to?
Oh, sorry.
That's
Why
okay.
Why is it a plural there?
This will be explained. So no spoiler alert. If it isn't explained today, since it's the last day of this week, and we'd have to wait, with God's help, for another year to get further on in these passages. Although maybe we'll take a look at this. I don't know. We'll think about it on our Sunday study. We'll see. Because the Sunday study was actually an attempt to go through the Rashis one at a time. So we'll see. We can talk about it. Right. So anyway, v'hitchilu b'she'ela me'inyan reshit habriah. And so they began this whole argument from the issue of the very beginning of creation. Uve'emet hatam dichtiv sham Hashem b'lashon rabim. And in truth, right? The reason here he's going to tell you. So Judith, he's going to give you the answer right now, okay, why it's in the plural. And he says, actually, the reason that that the name of God is written plural, in the plural, hu derech kavod, it's a way of showing honor. It's a way of expressing majesty. Kamo Adonai haaretz, when they talk about and they use the word Adonai, the lords of the land, and they're really talking about one person. Elohim krovim, right? Gods that are close. It's not, it means God, right? Our God, krovim. In Parshat Ve'et Chana. Elohim Kedoshim, again, it uses these terms as examples of honor, showing honor. Okay, Joshua. Ha-Elohim ha-Adirim. So the word Adir, right? Mighty, something like that. And it uses the word Ha-Elohim ha-Makim. Now, I think this means, and this is Shmuel Aleph, this first book of Samuel, Makim means to strike, right? Halchu Elohim, right? Again, all using the plural. That's Samuel, 2 Samuel. V'chein hanahug v'malchuta da'ara. And he says that's also a custom in earthly magic, to express earthly majesty, right? L'daber b'lashon rabim, to use plural language, kenoda. And the example I love to give is when Queen Victoria didn't think your joke was funny. What did Queen Victoria say to you?
We are not amused.
That's right. That's right. That's majesty speaks in the plural. So Judith, that's the answer. At least it's a one answer at least, and it's a good answer, I think. But you can decide. It's style. It's a style thing. And it's a way of showing honor and majesty to God. So let's go onwards. We will not get this done today, I'm sorry to say. Amar lahem. So Rabbi Simlai said to them, Lechu u'shalu et Adam harishon. Go and ask Adam, right? So we'll see of course, Adam wasn't around at the time, right? But what he meant was, Ritzono lomar. What he really meant was, Lechu velamdu, I think it is, mi pasuk, medaber b'riyat Adam harishon. What he meant was, go and learn from the verse that speaks about the creation of Adam, okay, as will be explained going on. Shinemar, because regarding that, the creation of Adam, it says, right, Ki she'al in Parshat Va'et, this is in Deuteronomy, Ki she'ol na liyamim harishonim. It says in that passage, please inquire of the early days, lemin hayom asher bara Elohim Adam ala aretz. So he says, going all the way back to the day when Elohim created Adam, right, or man on the earth. And if you have a very basic knowledge of Hebrew grammar, okay, notice it says bara, right? Bara, baru ein kativ kan. It doesn't say Elohim baru, because baru is the plural form of the verb, and bara is the third person singular of the verb. Baru is third person plural. Ein kativ kan ela bara. It says bara, singular. Amrule. But they said back to him, V'hakativ bereshit bara Elohim. But they say to him, yeah, well, it also says Elohim created as bara, third person singular, in Bereshit. I mean, where do you want to put your emphasis? On the plural? I mean, so what they're saying is, yeah, it says bara there, it says bara Elohim here. Amar laho, and he said to them, V'chi baru ketiv. And he says to them, well, again, does it say baru, barakativ? It says bara, third person plural, a third person singular. So again, there's room for explanation here, and we'll at least get started on this. I don't think we're going to get through it, but we'll get started. Because and this is from Yerushalmi, Brachot, chapter 9, Halacha Aleph, right? So, okay, so make sure I have the right place. Yes, Chet, and here it is. Okay. Okay. Ritzonor lomar. What he was saying to them is, Heim sha'aluhu lama kativ Elohim b'lashon rabim. They were asking him, why is Elohim written in the plural? Da hachayit hayechid me Elohim hu Eloha. Because there is a singular form of Elohim, and that's Eloha. That's the singular. V'heshiv lahem. And what he responded to them, he said, D'lefi te'utam hava le'lichtov baru. That if we're going to go with their understanding that Elohim is plural, it should have written baru. It should have said baru. Gamken b'lashon rabim. It also should have used the plural form of the verb. Umi dichtiv bara, but because it says bara as the verb, okay, shmamina, we can learn from this. Sherak reshut v'ratzon echad haya, that there was only one cause. I think I'm going to transfer reshut v'ratzon, and one desire, a single cause and desire, bevriyat haolam, in the creation of the world. Uma dichtiv Elohim b'lashon rabim, and the reason why it stated Elohim in the plural, mipnei shechen derek hakavod. It's because it's simply a stylistic issue of showing honor to majesty, ukamo shekatavnu, as we said above. V'lachen lo kasher, and for this reason, there is no problem, there's no difficulty. Ma dichtiv lifamim gam hapal b'lashon rabim. There's no problem that sometimes the verb actually is written in plural as well. Shegam zeh miderech hakavod. It's all a matter of style and showing honor to majesty. It's just as we mentioned above. I mean, it's even used in secular language as well. It is a style. In otvav would mean, footnote 6. But he goes on, it doesn't end there. Ach eino mevuar, ma I had difficulty what this exactly was saying here, right? Is it shagu? Is this a gimel or ma? Shanu? And what this is, I didn't know what this word was. It wasn't, so is it eviltam, which would mean their foolishness? What mistake in their foolishness? L'sha'alo od mi pasuk bereshit bara Elohim. Okay, I could be mistranslating this, and I do not have a translation to help me here. But it makes sense, right? That they were foolish enough to ask him again from this verse, Bereshit bara Elohim, Bereshit bara Elohim. V'alo kvar yadu, because they already knew. This is supporting my translation, right? After all, why were they dumb enough to ask again? Because they already knew mitzhuva hakodemet, from the previous answer he gave him about Adam, right? Shegam kan yashiv lahem mi kativ baro. Weren't they going to say again? Wasn't he going to respond the same way? It doesn't say baru, it says bara kativ, right? Gave them the same answer basically. So the way he answers, he says there was a reason for it, and that is because of the word bereshit. Aha. Because we know from our very first Rashi when we talked about it, that the word bereshit doesn't mean in the beginning. It means the beginning of. In the beginning of. It's in a construct form of the word. Otherwise, it should have said barishonah, as he's going to say. Kamoshi piresh Rashi kan, just as Rashi explains in this passage, de lafi pshuto, because if we wanted to explain it in a simple sense, hava le'lemar, it should have written barishonah. And it doesn't say that. It says in the beginning of. Piresh Rashi, and the problem is that there's a problem with the word bara here, and that's why they were asking the question, because unlike that other place where it says God created Adam, it doesn't have the word bereshit, right? It doesn't say bereshit bara, right? So here we go. He says, that if you want to try and translate this verse literally, tzarich lefaresh, you need to translate it kamo bereshit baro, that the verb that would follow would actually be a gerund. In other words, when you say something in the beginning of, it has to be a noun, the beginning of something. But here, the noun is like a verbal noun, right? In other words, in the beginning of God's creating, right? Ing is a gerund form of a verb, right? In the beginning of God's creating. Klomar, Bereshit, in other words, Bereshit Bri'at Shamayim. In other words, in the beginning of the creation of Shamayim Va'aretz, of the heavens and the earth. Va'aretz hayta tohu va'vu. At that particular time, the land was unformed and void, etc. And at that point, Vayomer Elohim, etc. At that point, it says, God said, let there be light. And of course, that means the first thing created was light. Yes, Judith. Go ahead. And I'm going to put the marking here. Yeah, please. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah. Go on.
Some modern translations begin with when God began to create.
I know. Well, it's a little smoother than in the beginning of God's creating, but that would be the way I've translated it is literal. It's a literal translation. But if you think about it, what that translation that you just quoted, right, has the same meaning. That when you read that sentence, and if you're going to say when God began, if you can quote it again, when God began to create the heaven and earth, right?
Yes.
Right. It's again, if you read that carefully, it means the first active act, so to speak, of God's creation was the creation of light, and not the heavens and the earth. And the term heavens and the earth, as my professor Hanan Brichto explains, is a figure of speech meaning everything. It's like when you say young and old were there. So that means middle-aged people weren't there? No, it's a way of taking the extremes and meaning the entire thing. And heavens and earth would be such an expression. I cannot think of the name of that figure of speech, okay? But what it is a figure of speech, and it simply means the universe, means everything. It's a poetic form of doing it. And sadly, we are going to have to stop here. Let me just stop the share, if I can find my cursor. And yep, and then I'm going to stop the recording. Take care.